Everybody judges a film in a certain way on whether they like it or not. Most people in the shorthand will just give you a number or a certain amount of stars out of 5. This is done to simplify things because not everyone can give a 3 to 5 minute in-depth written or video form or conversation form about how much they like something. So they'll give it a 7 out of 10 or 2.5 stars. But when most people are pressed on this, in my experience, they don't really think about why this is a 2 out of 10. They give up some kind of reason, but it's usually just made up on the spot. Just like a lot of people on the internet, I have too much time, and I've thought about how I would give a number system for the films that I rate and why I would give that specific number. And so this video can be a benchmark on anything that you see me review or anything on Letterboxd, and to give you a little bit more in-depth explanation on how my number system works. Disclaimer: there is no objective way to measure films, any kind of art form really, no matter how much you think about the rating system. And of course, this number will not fully respect, not fully comprehend my exact thoughts on a film. Something like that would have to be written down. It would have to be a 5 to 10 minute video. And still, that wouldn't cover everything. It would be more accurate, but it still wouldn't be perfect. There are other people here on YouTube who are much more famous than me. Chris Stuntman, he uses a letter grade system, A through F. And then Jeremy Johns, he uses really funny, general catch-all terms. I think that's really exciting. I think that was a very smart thing for him to do. And of course, there's people back in the day who used the more traditional written form. And then, of course, Robert Ebert and Gene Siskel, they had their thumbs up system. And they used 4 stars instead of 5 stars. So there are plenty of ways of rating the system. There's probably hundreds of them. Other people use different ways, and none of them are perfectly accurate. So if you see a number I give to a specific film, and you don't like my opinion about it, you don't like the number I gave it, that's a valid opinion. You're allowed to have that opinion. Mine is just more objectively true. The 3 main pillars on how I rate a movie are as follows. 1 is the film's self-expression, which is a term I'll explain later. 2, the film's place in film history, or how much I think it will have an impact on film. And then 3, of course, is just my general reactions and how much I liked it. Let's talk film self-expression. Now, this could be its own video because I'm pretty sure no one else is using this term. I made it up. But the basic idea of it is that every single film that you're watching is trying to make you feel or think about something through a very specific lens. Action films are, in general, trying to make you feel very excited, and they will use fight scenes to express how amazing their main character is. On the other end, you have romance films that are trying to make you fall in love with the characters falling in love with each other. It would be weird to say that an action movie sucks because of the lack of romance, even if there is no love interest in the movie, and it would be equally as weird to say that a romance film sucks because of the bad action choreography. Before Sunrise and Mad Max are both 10 out of 10s for me, but for very widely different reasons. And even though I'm using the same criteria for all these films, the acting, the editing, the cinematography, the score, etc., the way that they are applied to that film's genre, style, message, or themes can be applied very widely and very differently. Another example would be acting, especially in musicals. Musicals are not supposed to be realistic. People just start dancing and singing randomly throughout the movie. It's not based in a real-life story. So the acting is always going to be a little bit more over the top than a serious drama. But to say that the acting in those movies is not as good would be a critique on what the film is not trying to do. Films should be judged by what they're trying to say and what they're trying to do and how well they're succeeding at that, not just by our own personal style preferences. And then we have film history. Now, film history is a lot harder to place down because different countries, different cultures have different films as more or less impactful. The French think they're the most important, the Russians think they're the most important, and of course here in America, everything revolves around Hollywood. And this is mainly just meant for older films from like the 1920s and 30s that I appreciate what they've done through their influence. For example, Nosferatu is a 100-year-old movie from the 1920s, and it is extremely influential when it comes to the horror genre. But when I'm watching it, I don't personally feel any fear, and of course, the visuals, and it originally was made with no sound, are not as good as what we have in the modern times. But it was groundbreaking, and it was terrifying for its time. So I appreciate that it's able to capture how people felt back in the day, and give that to me in the modern day. And so these films will typically get a higher rating if they're the First, to start a genre or a movement. Lastly, I don't think I need to harp on this too much, but this is just my personal opinion, how I feel about it. I don't claim to know everything about the art form, and my emotions and feelings change from day to day. Things outside of the film might affect how I feel about the film later on or during. For example, someone might cut me off in traffic on the way to the movie theater, and I might be a little bit more angry going into a movie, and I might give it a lower rating. But if I ever see it in the future, I might give it a higher rating. Now, let's talk about the actual scale that I use. So unlike most people who use a 1 to 10 scale, I like to use a 0 to 10 scale. And then in Letterboxd, I just translate this with 0 and 1 being the half star. There's not many movies that go into that category anyway. And then the rest of the stars are just double whatever the rating is. So if I give something 1 star, it's a 2 out of 10. If something's 1.5 stars, it's 3 out of 10. 2 stars, 4 out of 10, etc., etc. The reason why I like to use 0 in my scale is because then I have a middle number to put all the average films. Here it's the number 5, and then I have the even amount of numbers on both sides of it. 5 is where the most okayest films go, the just fine films, films that I don't really love, and also films that I don't really hate. The reason why I like using 5 as my average as well is because a lot of people use 7 or 8 out of 10 as their average, which only leaves 9 and 10 to tell if a movie is great or amazing or perfect, while on the other end, movies that are very poorly made get 7 all the way down to 1 or 0, which is already unbalanced for a system that is already limiting me so much. So in this way, I feel like it's more balanced and it gives a more accurate portrayal on how I feel about something. A film that I give a 10 out of 10 is one that is either expressing itself perfectly, highly influential in the film history, or I personally like it. It's usually a combination of all three. An example of a 10 for me would be Jaws. I personally really love it. It's extremely influential. It basically invented the summer blockbuster, and its themes and ideas are being expressed perfectly. And even though I've been using the word perfect throughout this video, I know there's no such thing as perfect when it comes to art, but something has to take the top. And then at 0, I have movies that I feel lack any value as a piece of art and should be shamed for their attempt. Of course, nothing in this world that's artistic has no value. Everything has at least some value. But just like with the 10, something has to be on top. Here, something has to be at the bottom. And you might be saying, well, most films at least have something good in them, like the costuming, the animation, or the set design. Those people are usually doing a pretty good job. But then I would give everything a 1 or a 2, and that would just destroy the system altogether. Here, I usually have those early 2000s parody movies, the one that's like about the 300 and the Twilight movies. These movies are very bad. They're difficult to get through even with a group of friends. They barely keep your attention. It's mostly crude humor, random references, and just poor recreations of the actual film. Sometimes two films have the same number rating from me, but for very different reasons. For example, I have Babylon and Nobody, both as 7 out of 10s. Babylon is an amazing movie. I love so many scenes from it. But it also has some of the worst scenes from that year, and they should have never gotten past the cutting room floor. Nobody, on the other hand, has a 7 out of 10 because it's just an above average action film for me. It doesn't get much love from me, nor does it get much hate. So Babylon is brought down by how many negatives it has, and then Nobody doesn't get any higher because it doesn't have enough good things to bring it up any higher. And this is true for all the numbers on the scale, though the ones in the middle, 4, 5, 6, 7, are going to range more than the ones at the more extremes, the 10s and the 0s. And then lastly, before I go, I do want to mention, in the future, I will most likely change my opinion on many of these films. I will change the number, raise it, I will lower it, depending on a rewatch, depending on a sequel that comes out with it, or the more films I watch, the more I might appreciate certain things, because just like everybody else that's alive, I'm a human being, and my experiences will change my opinions as I get older. The things that I value will change, and that's all I have for you. Let me know whether you like my rating system, whether it's too much, whether it's not enough, you wish there was more detail to it, and let me know how you rate films, or the way you've seen other people rate films, and whether you like it or not. And as always, thank you for watching. Godspeed.